podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
The Two-Footed Podcast is brought to you by EPLindex.com and our presenting sponsor, Liberty Shield. Liberty Shield is a VPN provider. A virtual privacy network allows you to go online, change your location, access things you're geo-blocked from, while keeping your data safe. So, as an example, if you are a UK expat and want access to BBC iPlayer to watch Match of the Day, or ITV Hub, or all four, will you get that message that says this content is not available in your location? A Liberty Shield VPN gets you around that block, allows you to watch whatever you want on those services, while also keeping your data safe. And it goes further than that. It allows you to open up Netflix's entire library by just changing your IP address. Liberty Shield is the #1 rated VPN provider on Trustpilot with 5-star ratings across the board. So go to libertyshield.com right now, use the code EPL25 and get either the hardware package or the software package. The hardware package is a router that you plug into your existing router, and any item you want to change the IP address on, be it your phone or your television, you connect that to the new Liberty Shield router. All other items can remain connected to your existing router. There's also a software package which is instantly downloadable to your device and you can get using straight away. Again, libertyshield.com, EPL25 for 25% off at checkout. We're also brought to you by Home of Hopcroft, a giftware and homeware company located in Scotland but shipping worldwide. Check out homeofhopcroft.co.uk and do check out the EPL Index and Anfield Index shops, which you'll find on Etsy. Use the codes EPL10 or RED10 for 10% off at checkout. And lastly, do remember to check out A Tad Predictable, hosted by Tadiwa. That podcast is on this feed before every Premier League match week. And then the EPL Roundtable, hosted by Kevin DeVries, on its own EPL Roundtable feed. So just search EPL Roundtable in your podcast device. And that's out after every match week. Now, on with the show. What's good, boys and girls? Two-Footed Podcast. Today is Tuesday. It is the 11th of June. Hope you're all well and having yourselves a pleasant day. Today, we are going to talk about Chelsea and we're going to talk about Crystal Palace. The seasons that they've had, what they might want to do this summer, and the outlook moving forward. And I think a lot of people would look at Chelsea and the season that they've just had and they'd probably laugh and say, oh, they're a dumpster fire. And in some ways they are, and in some ways they're not. I think they've made some strange decisions. I think Todd Bowley and the rest of Blueco deciding to empower certain people within the club to make decisions has backfired routinely. They've obviously spent a lot of money. They spent most of that money badly. And when we look at them, it's very easy to laugh and say, well, look how drastically they've underachieved. If we travel back and take a look at the 2022 season and we look at what they did, they spent huge money on Raheem Sterling, hasn't really worked out. Big money on Kalidou Koulibaly, binned off after 1 year. Gabriel Slonina, we haven't seen him play for Chelsea yet, but he is very highly regarded. Carney Chukwuemeka is a big talent. Fair to say it hasn't worked out there yet, injuries being a part of that. Spent huge money on Marc Cucurella. It's been a disaster. Brought in Cesare Caicedo, very talented player, but we haven't seen him for Chelsea yet. Spent huge money on Wesley Fofana, and he has missed most of his time since joining with injury. Very, very talented, but hasn't worked out. The Aubameyang signing did not work out. In the January window, they went out and spent ridiculous money. They brought in Badiashile. He's been average so far. David Datro Fofana, allegedly they're open to selling him this summer. Andre Santos, we haven't seen him in a Chelsea shirt yet. Mudryk was huge money. He's been a disaster. Mideki was 30 million. It hasn't been great so far. Malo Gusto was 26. That one has paid off. He was really good this past season when he filled in at right back and at times at left back. They spent 107 million on Enzo Fernandez, and it's fair to say that one has not worked so far. Though I do think he is an exceptional player, that move just has not worked out. A big part of that is that in the summer of 2023, they signed Moises Caicedo for $100 million to partner him. That's not a pairing that works very well. That same summer, they signed Nicholas Jackson. Let's just say it was okay at best. Nkunku was injured, struggled for form when he came back, got injured again, and then struggled for form when he came back. So a lot more to come from him, but so far hasn't been good. Angelo Gabriel's been on loan. Ogochukwu has barely featured. Disasi's been average. Robert Sanchez was flat out bad. Lavia has barely played, if at all. David Washington sent out on loan, no sign of him yet. Jordi Petrovic has been decent. Cole Palmer has been outstanding. But all things considered, how much of the money that they've spent so far has actually worked out? 40 million for Palmer. Let's count the 12.5 for Petrovic because he was first choice. That gives us 52.5 million. Is there anyone else signed last summer that we can really say has worked out so far? Let's be generous and include Nicholas Jackson. That gets us to 84.5. Malo Gusto was 27. Well, 26.5 actually. So that gets us to 111 million. That's kind of it. That's 1/10 of what they've spent. When we include the managers, they bought the club. Thomas Tuchel was in charge. They sacked him in early September of last season. They replaced him with Graham Potter, paid big money to get him from Brighton, gave him a big contract that was guaranteed, sacked him after, 7 months? Sacked him in April. Didn't even last 7 months. Paid him in full to go away. Had to bring in Frank Lampard and pay him till the end of the season. Then they hired Pochettino. They gave him 1 season. He's off, and they're going to be paying him, I believe, for the next 2 years. Now we have Enzo Maresca in charge. But that's more money because they had to pay Pochettino to go away. They had to buy Maresca out of his contract, as well as some of his staff out of contracts at Leicester. All of this money spent, and this doesn't include Henry Paez money spent. Willian Estevao, assuming that one gets done, money spent. They're deals that aren't going to pay off for a few years. And Chelsea's outlook will be, yeah, it hasn't worked so far, but in time it will. And a lot of that is true. When we look at the squad of players and what they will go into the coming season with, we look at the goalkeepers. Robert Sanchez, not good enough. Bettinelli is okay, but he's 32 and he's a squad player. But he's your third goalkeeper. Jordi Petrovic, I would say, is a number 2. Kepa was not signed by these owners, but they're probably going to have to pay him to go away this summer. Slonina, they hope, is the long-term number 1. So long-term, they might look at it and say, okay, Slonina, Petrovic and Sanchez, we're going to be good there. But what about the next 2 to 3 years? Is Petrovic going to be that guy? Because that doesn't really seem like it's going to work out if you want to finish if you want to win the league, which is surely what the aim is when you spend all this money. Disasi, squad player. Cucurella, I think they'd sell. Badiashile, squad player. Chalobah should be a squad player, but they want to sell. But he is contracted till 2028, so best of luck with that. Ben Chilwell wasn't signed by them, obviously, neither was Reece James. Levi Colwill they brought back. So if we look at this, you could say Colwill left side centre-back, right side centre-back, Wesley Fofana. That's your starting pair. And then you've got Badiashile, Chalobah, and Disasi as your depth. So you could look at that and say Chelsea are set at centre-back. That's a good young group. Disasi is 26, Badiashile is 23, Chalobah's 24, Colwill's 21, and Fofana is 23. You could look at that and say we're going to be good there for the next few years. The issue is Wesley Fofana's injury. Can you count on him? Or do you need to go and spend again in that position? Now, they have signed for this season coming Tosin Adarabioyo, but that seems like it's him in, Chalobah out. I'd have big doubts that he's been signed to be a starter. Who's your left back? Chilwell is injury prone, had a really poor season. Cucurella has been pretty poor. Well, he's been flat out terrible since going there for the most part. The best prospect left back you have is Ian Maatson, who you gave a contract with a 35 million buyout, who doesn't seem to want to play for you. Right back, you've got Reece James, you've got Malo Gusto, but can you count on Reece James? I mean, he's 24 years of age, and look how many injuries he's already had. At best, you would say Chelsea need to buy a left back, unless they can convince Maatson to stay, and a goalkeeper to bridge the gap until Slonina is ready. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario means another centre back also needed, and they're expensive because it has to be a starter. In midfield, they've got Enzo, they've got Caicedo, they've got Ogachukwu, they've got Caicedo, they've got Conor Gallagher, they've got Andre Santos. But do they have a pairing that we're on Romeo Lavia as well? But do they have a pairing that works? I think Enzo and Santos could be a pairing. I think Caicedo and Santos could be a pairing. I think Lavia and Caicedo could potentially work. But, and Ogachukwu and Enzo could work, for sure. But the issue is, two of them cost 100 million, and they're the two that don't fit together. Now, if this manager wants to play 4-3-3, either Enzo or Caicedo is the six, the sitter. Andre Santos fits really well as an 8 in a 4-3-3. And the other role could go to Lavia, it could go to Ogachukwu, it could go to Caicedo, it could go to Chukwuemeka. But it could go to Conor Gallagher, assuming he stays, because he seems to want to. But the question is, what do you do with the other of Enzo and Caicedo? Because those two in a 3 really doesn't sound good. Regardless of who the third one is, it doesn't sound good. And then in attack, assuming it's 4-3-3, Cole Palmer has to play. He'll be on the right. And then Nkunku would have to play, so he'd be on the left. So where's the pace in wide areas? Now, if it's 4-2-3-1, Palmer right and Nkunku central, and you need a left winger, there's been some talk that you would play Nkunku left, Palmer as the 10, and buy a right winger. But why would you do that if you already have Henry Paez and you have Estevao set to join in the next 18 months? Why would you block their paths when they are such unique talents? If you're doing that, if Nkunku's going to play on the left, first and foremost, you're playing him in a position that's not the one you bought him for. And you're not going to get the best out of him. The best role for him is as a 10. The best role for Palmer right now is as the right wing. So you need a left wing. So you need an entirely new left flank and a goalkeeper, and then you need a striker as well. This is after spending £1 billion. This is after spending over £1 billion. 900 million of that money thus far has not recognised as good purchases. There's no guarantee that all of it will, that half of it will, that a third of it will. I would expect one of Enzo and Caicedo to work out, but only if they're separated. Now, this manager, if he comes in to play 4-2-3-1, it's going to be Enzo and Caicedo, and it doesn't work. And it didn't work at all under Pochettino. you didn't get the best of either of them. When they were separated, they both looked brilliant. When they were put together, they both looked very, very average, sometimes below average. So I just look at this group and I see a lot of potential. There's incredible amounts of talent in the squad, but I don't see what the master plan is. Like, there's talk that they want Elise, Palmer, and Nkunku behind a striker. Are you getting the best of all three? Because all three need to be the primary creator. All three need the game to go through them. The game can only go through one of them. If you're playing Palmer as your 10, you ideally want pace on both flanks. Now, Elise is quick, but he's not an outside threat. He's going to cut in field, and he's going to cut into the same positions that Cole Palmer wants to play in. And you're going to have this enormous overlap again, as you have in midfield with the Enzo Caicedo thing. And if we look at what Leicester were doing last season, mix and match between 4-3-3 and 4-2-3-1, but did settle mostly on the 4-2-3-1. But Kieran Dewsbury Hall was playing as the 10 with Fatawa and Mavididi on the wings. Now, both of them are pretty quick, but also they were often used on their natural side. So Mavididi prefers to play left side, but was played right side. And Fatawa likewise prefers right side, but was played left side, so they could get outside and provide service. If you play Nkunku on the right, are you going to get much from him? If he tries that, I have a hard time understanding how Chelsea, this far into this project, which thus far has yielded a 6th place finish this past season, which isn't terrible, but certainly isn't good enough when you've spent £1 billion, and a 12th place finish the first time. It's also yielded 2 third-round exits in the domestic cups in 22-23 and a quarter-final exit in the Champions League. And then this past season, with no European football, a semi-final in the FA Cup and a runners-up spot in the FA Cup, or runners-up spot in the League Cup. None of that's good enough when you spend this much money. And you're still entrusting decision-making to two guys who had never done this before. Like, they'd never worked at this level before. And it doesn't feel like they're well suited to this level, to this role that they have as co-sporting directors. They're just continually buying players with no real plan for how to use them. Like, if they sign Michael Elise, right, let's just say they do, you will have Elise, Mudeki, Hayes, and Estevao, and Cole Palmer, all of whom are at their best in the same position. You'll also have Harvey Vale, who, up until all of the circus started, was seen as the best young prospect in their academy. Now, I know he went on loan to Bristol this past season and ended up being stuck playing as a left-back for whatever reason. Largely because Joey Barton, an idiot. But to me, that's an awful lot of players for one position. And how do you keep them all happy? And like, you look at the squad, you look at the contracts these players are on. Like Sanchez 2030, Petrovic 2030. That's 6 years away. Slonina has another 4 years left. Disasi has 5 left. Kukureya has 4 years left. Badiashile has 6 years left. Colwell has 5 years left. Gusto has 6 left. Fofana has 5. Enzo has 7 years left. Ogochukwu has 6. Caicedo has 7. Lavia has 6. Santos has 6. Mudryk has 7. Madeki has 6. Jackson has 7. Palmer and Washington both have 6. And you'd imagine that when Estevao and Paez arrive, they're going to sign 6, 7, 8 year contracts. And you think you're going to keep all of these players happy? You think they're just going to be thrilled to sit on the bench and not play and not develop? Like, I understand the idea of strength and depth. That's obscene and not in the best interest of anybody. And certainly not in the best interest of the club. Like, Todd Bowley and his gang of investors, they seem to think that just because they gave a player a contract, that player would not come back in the interim looking for an improved contract. They seem to think that it's like US sports where, you only renegotiate the contract at the end of the contract or in the last 12 months. But that's not the case at all here. Cole Palmer is going to want a new contract. The contract he signed last summer was based on what we've seen from him at City. He's in a very different situation right now. He's going to want a new contract. And if they say, well, no, you signed a long-term contract, he's not going to be happy. I mean, there's a lot of stories that come out about Bowley and how clueless he was when he first came into the club. And I think the funniest of them was when he thought that if they were to buy a player, that they inherited that player's contract. Forgetting the 4-4-3 nonsense that he came up with. He thought if they were to buy, let's just say, Michael Elise, they would take on the existing contract that Elise had at Palace. And that was the viewpoint he had. Well, we'll buy all these young players who are earning lower money. And then when those contracts come up, then we'll give them bigger contracts. He didn't understand that they had to give them new contracts. And he seems to believe that having given these players these obscenely long contracts, they're going to be tied into them and not going to come back in a year, 2 years, 3 years looking for bigger and better. It's obscenely badly run. But again, there is a ton of talent there. And the right people could go in and make a real go of that. The right manager, maybe it's Maresca, I have doubts. The right sporting director could go in and really make a go of that, because the current people that are there don't really seem to have much clue as to what they're actually doing. All they've done is gone out, spent a bunch of money with no plan in place. If we look at the season that they've just had, finished in 6th, disastrous first half of the season. Really and truly, pretty much a disaster up until February. Started off with a home draw against Liverpool, lost away to West Ham quite comprehensively, did beat Luton, then lost at home to Nottingham Forest, drew away to Bournemouth, who were struggling badly at the time, lost at home to Villa, then beat Fulham and Burnley away from home, drew at home with Arsenal, a game they threw away, lost at home to Brentford, did beat Spurs when Spurs had 2 men sent off, 4-4 draw with City. They probably should have won that game. They got pumped up at Newcastle. They did beat Brighton, then they lost to Manchester United and Everton, then they beat Sheffield United, then they lost away to Wolves, then they beat Palace, then they beat Luton, then they beat Fulham. So we are now through 21 games of the season. Their wins are Luton, Fulham, Burnley, Spurs, Brighton at home, Sheffield United, Palace, Luton and Fulham. That's what they'd won at this point. That's 9 wins from 21 games. And they had lost 8. They'd lost 8, drawn 4. And the only win from that against a team who at that point was top half. Well, actually, there was two. They beat Spurs away, Spurs had 10 men, and they beat Brighton. Spurs had 9 men, they beat Brighton. Now, Palace would end up finishing in the top half, but at that point, Palace were a mess. They'd beaten Luton twice in that run, and Burnley and Sheffield United. 4 wins against the teams they got relegated. Then they got hammered at Anfield and they quit. Then they got beaten heavily at home by Wolves. Then they ran 3 wins together. Then they ran a long unbeaten run together. They beat Palace. They drew at City, drew at Brentford. They beat Newcastle, which was a good result. Then they drew at Burnley. Then they beat Manchester United, and then they drew at Sheffield United. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Now, the plus side on that is they are improving. Because even if you're taking that step back, it's only half of the progress you've made. Then they beat Everton and beat them heavily 6-0. And that should have been a confidence booster. But a week later, they went and absolutely soiled themselves against Arsenal and gave up. Then they drew 2-2 away to Villa, which was a good result. And then they finished the season strong. They beat Tottenham, they beat West Ham, they beat Nottingham Forest, they beat Brighton, and they beat Bournemouth. 5 wins in a row to end the season. It's a good end to the season. But if we look across that season, you've got the 2 wins over Spurs, a win over West Ham, 2 wins over Palace, which wouldn't have happened if Glasgow was in charge, by the way. The win over Newcastle and the win over Manchester United. There's 7 wins against teams in the top half there. Now, they were one of the teams in the top half. That leaves 9 other. That's 18 games against teams in the top half. They won 7. That's not great. Not great. They beat the teams they should beat, teams at the bottom of the table, but they didn't in some other games. For example, they drew at home with Burnley, they drew away with Sheffield United. They're not good results. They lost at home to Nottingham Forest. These are really, really bad results. And that's what Chelsea were across the season, is they were Jekyll and Hyde. 1 week they looked really good, and the next they looked like a train wreck. The last 5 wins in a row helped them climb from 9th to 6th, and maybe gives a bit of a false impression about what their season was overall. Bottom line of it is they lost 11 games. They conceded 63 goals. Only scored 77. Now, that's still more than Villa and more than Tottenham, but neither of those teams paid £1 billion for the squad. And both of them conceded less. And both of them got more points, and both of them finished above you. Of the teams that finished above them, they beat Spurs twice, drew at Villa once, drew at City twice, drew at Arsenal, drew at Liverpool, but only beat Spurs. That's the only team they beat. They didn't beat any of the top 4. No wins against the top 4. With all that money spent. In the Cup, they beat Preston, they beat Villa in a replay, they beat Leeds, they beat Leicester, quite fortunate with the run, played City, lost to City. In the EFL Cup, they beat Wimbledon just about beat Wimbledon, really, really poor on the day. They beat Brighton, they beat Blackburn, again, quite a fortunate run. They beat Newcastle on penalties, then they played Middlesbrough, 3 lower league teams. Got to the final and lost to a bunch of kids from Liverpool. There's no real way to spin this season as a big positive. They didn't spend £1 billion to finish 6th. And they're going to have to do some very serious internal reflection on what their plan is for the next 3 years. And what areas of their team they're going to need to look to improve. Because I haven't heard a single left back, a single left winger been linked to them. Haven't heard a goalkeeper been linked. Haven't heard there have been some strikers linked. But you keep hearing about central midfielders and right wingers, positions in which they should not even be considering buying it. because they're already well stocked and have more talent to come in the likes of Estevao and Kendry Páez. So you would wonder, when does it actually become an issue for the owners that the people they've entrusted with building the squad don't actually seem to be building a squad? They just seem to be playing Football Manager in real life. Yeah, right. Got to go to break. Back after this. Right, welcome back. So, Crystal Palace are next on our list. So, we'll dig into them as I won't be here tomorrow. So, might as well cover two today, as we did one of the days last week. Crystal Palace are one of the teams I'm most excited about in the Premier League right now. And obviously, because they are a smaller club, there is the risk that they get pilfered by, the bigger, richer clubs. Because they've put together an exceptional group. And that's, showing in the fact that they have 4 players in the England squad for the Euros. And it's interesting that Wilf Zaha was there for so long and was linked with moves here, there and everywhere, and eventually left on a free to go to Galatasaray, where he's just won a league title and had a pretty good season and played in the Champions League and done all that kind of stuff. But they got nothing for him. And normally when a club like Palace has, one real blue chip player, the aim is to sell them for as much as possible. And if they lose them for free, it is generally seen as this massive blow because it's not helping them balance the books or enable future spending. But when we look at what Palace have done over recent years, obviously it started bringing in Eberechi Eze, then they brought in Michael Olise, then they went out and they got Mark Guehi and Joachim Andersen, and then last summer they had, summer 2022 they had Czech Doucouré, and then last summer they had Matthias Franke, who's very, very talented, and Jefferson Lerma on a free, which is a really good move. And in January they go and they get Adam Wharton and Daniel Muniz, and of course, I should have said last summer they also bought Dean Henderson. The previous summer they brought in Sam Johnston. So if we look at their squad and you look at how strong they are across the board. So goalkeeper, Dean Henderson is an England international. He's going to the Euros. Sam Johnston is also an England international and probably would have gone to the Euros. Now, it would have likely been instead of Henderson, but nonetheless, that's still 2 very, very good goalkeepers that they have. Defensively, we know this manager plays a back 3. We'll come to the manager in a second, but you have Guehi, Anderson, and Chris Richards, plus Chadi Riyad is coming in, and maybe you'll add one more during the summer window. Maybe there's just one more piece you can get. That's a really strong group of centre-backs. The risk, of course, is that someone comes in and nabs Mark Guehi. But you paid 20 million for him, you're going to get 50 to 60. So you will make huge profit in which you can turn around and maybe reinvest that in 2 or 3 players. So defensively, they look well set up for the next couple of years, even if Guehi leaves, because they'll be able to go and reinvest that money. Our right wing back, they brought in Muniz in January. He already looks a really good fit. And Tyreek Mitchell at left wing back was much improved under Glasner than he had been for about 18 months under Hodgson. There is no real depth behind them. Klein and Ward are well past their best, so maybe that's an area they should look to address. The midfield is stacked. Czech Doucouré was signed for 19 million. They came quite close to selling him last summer for over 60. Now, he did suffer a bad Achilles injury, but he signed a new deal. He's there till 2029. You're definitely going to have him next season, and he will rebuild his value. Next to him, you've got Adam Wharton, who has just been outstanding since coming into the Premier League and already earned an England cap and obviously now in the England squad for the Euros. To have that as a central midfield pairing, that's as good a double pivot as there's going to be in the league. It genuinely is. Moving forward over the next 2 to 3 years, that's as good as you can project for anybody else. Like, you can look at City with Rodri, but who's next? Arsenal play at 3, obviously, but even if you say Rice, and who? Because it's not Odegaard, he's 10. So it's Rice and who? Liverpool don't have better. United don't have better. I would probably take the Palace pair over the Spurs pair, even though I really like that pairing. I feel like this Palace pairing could be exceptionally good if they get that run together. Behind them, you've got Jefferson Lerma, who's a proven operator at this level. You've got Will Hughes, who's a proven operator at the level. And you've got Ahamada, who I'm hopeful will get more chances next season. Now, the question there is, what happens when a big offer comes in for War? Well, you paid less than 20. You're going to get somewhere between 60 and 80. Again, they will be able to reinvest that money. So again, that's a really good sign for their future. They'll either have this exceptional player or they'll have a ton of money to go out, replace him, and add elsewhere. They're really strong in that midfield. I think Riedewald will probably leave this summer. I think there was some talk he might get a new deal, and maybe he will. But I mean, he's your 6th midfielder. Now, Jeffrey Schlupp, he's got a year left, and if he stays, maybe he's the backup to Mitchell as the left wing back. That's probably the best use of him in a 3-4-2-1. So that helps there. And you can probably just get through with what you have at right wing back, or maybe Jordan Ayew can fill in there because it's a role he's played in the past, and with his work rate, he could probably do a job. So maybe they don't need to do anything other than get Shadi Riyad done and look for one more centre-back. Because, being honest, James Tompkins should be allowed to leave this summer. Maybe they view Rob Holding as someone that can just do a job. And if that's the case, then, fair enough. In attack, then, you've got Elise, who's exceptional. You've got Eze, who's exceptional. You paid 16 million for Eze. There is talk he could go, but again, it's 65 million plus. Paid 8 million for Elise. Could go. Again, it's 65 million plus. It's going to be a huge sum of money coming in for those players if they leave. If they leave, they might not want to leave. They might look at this situation and think, we could really do something here. We could get Crystal Palace into Europe. And I genuinely think that's a possibility. Because behind them, you've got Matthias Franke, who I think we'll see a lot more of in the coming season. He's the ideal backup for Eze. In the 9 position, you've got Mateta and Edouard. Now, for me, I'd probably look to move Edouard on and bring someone else in who can do a job in that role. A different type, an Eddie Nketiah type of penalty box player. Maybe one of Raksaki, who they regard quite highly, or Malcolm Abue, who they signed from Derby, can be that backup to Elise. I mean, they don't have a whole lot to do. This is a really good group of players. It's the most talented Crystal Palace squad I've ever seen. There's a really good academy there. They're really smartly run. And now they have a manager who's as good as most. Like, he's as good as most. You're not getting... I don't think you could name 5 better managers in the league than Oliver Glasser. And it's not just what he's done at Palace, it's what he did prior to joining Palace. At Eintracht Frankfurt, he was absolutely brilliant in his 2 years there and won the Europa League. At Wolfsburg, he was absolutely brilliant in his 2 years there and got them to a Champions League berth. Like, he's done tremendous work at both clubs. And when we look at what he did last summer, last season, he takes over from Hodgson on the 19th of February. Now, on the 19th of February, they'd just drawn with Everton. They were 25 games into the season. They were sitting in 15th. They'd won 2 games since November. The 4th of November, they beat Burnley. And since then, they'd beaten Brentford and Sheffield United. Their wins had been Sheffield United away. They beat them on the opening day. They beat Wolves at home. They beat United away, which was a really good result. They beat Burnley. They beat Brentford. They beat Sheffield United. That was it. That was it. One win that you would say you didn't expect, which is the one away to United. You would expect them to beat Wolves at home. You expected them to beat Burnley away. You expected them to beat Sheffield United away. You expected them to beat Brentford home. And you expected them to beat Sheffield United at home. Glasner's first game, they beat Burnley at home. Again, it's an expected win. So to that point, which is 26 games in, the only win you'd look at and go, that's really good, is the United. They'd had some good draws. They'd drawn away to Brentford. They'd drawn home to Fulham, home to Forest. They're fine. A little bit disappointing, maybe. Away to West Ham is a good point. Away to City was a great point. The draw with Brighton was at home. It's their rivalry, whatever. The draw away to Everton weren't very good. So you're looking at the win over City, the draws away to West Ham. Sorry, the win over United, the draws away to West Ham, and away to City. That's what you're looking at as you give them real credit for those. 3 out of 26. Then they lose to Spurs. They draw with Luton, that's poor. They draw away to Forest, meh. Lose away to Bournemouth is fine. Lose home to City is fine. Then they go to Anfield and they win. That's a really good result. Then they hammer West Ham 5-2. That's a really good result. Then they beat Newcastle 2-0. That's a really good result. They go away to Fulham and get a point. That's fine. They hammer United at home. Great result. They beat Wolves 3-1 away. That's a good result. And then they destroy Villa on the final day. Now, Villa were already qualified for the top 4, so there was nothing on the game for Villa. But Liverpool, West Ham, Newcastle, Manchester United, and Villa, that's 5 top half teams that they've beaten in a 7-game run, while also winning away to Wolves. Molineux's a tough place to go, and getting a point away to Fulham. That's an incredibly good run to end the season. And the difference between that and Chelsea finishing the season with 5 wins in a row is that with Palace, 15th, 14th, 13th, that felt like where they belong. Even with the run where they go 8 games without a win, 5 losses, 3 draws, you're not overly surprised by it. Yes, some of the results are poor. Losing at home to Everton, losing to Luton away, draw with West Ham in there, losing to Bournemouth, losing to Liverpool. You're not overly surprised here. A draw with City, you're surprised in a good way. A draw with Brighton, fine. Losing with Chelsea, this is not outside the realms of normality for what happens to clubs like Palace. They go through these runs each and every season. What these clubs don't do is put together a run like Palace did at the end of the season. And once Glasner replaced Hodgson, it just felt like everything at the club changed. It felt like there was a lot more positivity around what they were doing and around the players knowing what was expected of them and going out and playing in a way that was really getting the best out of them. Like, Wharton steps in and just looks like he's been there for years. Eze, who we all know is an immensely talented player, but he could be quite frustrating because he could just go through dips in form. But all of a sudden, he's, for the first time in his Crystal Palace career, playing in a team that's maximising his ability. Same with Elise. And Elise had a frustrating season with the injury, but you look at the form he was in at the end of the year, look how he was playing. Look at Mateta. I mean, that guy, he was written off by a lot of people as a bad sign. They signed him in January 2022 for $9 million. He's only still 26, by the way. There's still more to come from him. But he scores 5 goals in the back half of his first season in the league. He scores 2 last season. 2. 29 games, 2 goals. And it felt like that might just be who he is. You know, a good hold-up player who works hard and links players well, but doesn't know how to score goals. And then last season he gets 16 and 19 in all competitions. And when we look at that run at the end of the season, he scores 2 against West Ham. He gets 2 against Newcastle. He scores against United. He scores away to Wolves. And he gets a hat-trick on the final day. 2, 4, 5, 6. 9 goals in their last 6 games. 9 goals in their last 6 games. That's more than he scored in his first 18 months at the club. He had 7 to that point in the season. He finished with 6. Because he had a manager who believed in him and a team around him that played to his strengths. And I think they're in a really strong position where you're not looking at it and thinking, right, they need this and they need that. They needed a left-footed centre-back. Chadi Riyad is coming in. That takes care of that. And as we look at that team now, Dean Henderson in goal, Guehi, Anderson, Riyad. That's a really, really good group. Munez on the right, Mitchell on the left. Doucouré and Wharton. Elise and Eze. Like that box midfield of Doucouré and Wharton with Elise and Eze in the advanced roles, that's easily a Champions League caliber group of players. Easily. And Anderson's a Champions League caliber player, and Henderson's a Champions League caliber player, and Riyad's a Champions League caliber player. And Guehi is undeniably a Champions League caliber player. So their spine, just take out the wing backs and look at the middle of that team. Munez is good. Is he great? Probably not. And he's 28, so he's not like a long-term fixture, but he's been a big improvement for them, for what they were getting from that right back position. Mitchell's still young enough that he's got another level to go up. But again, he's probably not, but you don't need him to. The one player you need to stay in the same type of form is Mateta. Because everything else behind him is now built. That's a really, really strong. Henderson's very good. Guehi's outstanding. Anderson's very good. Riyad has the potential to be outstanding. Doucouré is outstanding. Wharton's outstanding. Elise is incredible. Eze is outstanding. If the two on the flanks are just good and Mateta is good, that's without question a top half team. And there's some decent depth there, particularly in midfield. There's some really good depth there. So for them, obviously, it's a waiting game to see if anybody leaves. But any of the players that might leave, Guehi, Eze, and Elise, because I don't think Wharton will leave this summer, and I don't think Doucouré will leave this summer. But if any of the other three do, they'll make huge profits and be able to pivot, go and replace, and then maybe add something else or 2 more pieces for the long haul. Like, let's just say Guehi goes. Let's say they get 65 million. Turn around, go to Chelsea, 25 million for Trevoh Chalobah. Not as good as Guehi, but he fits really well in the back three. So you get him. And now you've got 40 million in your pocket. And maybe you put 20 million away because it helps with your profit sustainability. 20 million is banked, And that's just a down payment on what we've already spent in the past. But now you've still got 20 million. And maybe you go and use that money to add another super talented young attacker. So that if Elise does leave, you've got his replacement ready to go. In the same way that I think they view Franca as the guy to replace Eze when he goes. Now, who that player is, I don't know. That's not for me to decide. That's for them to figure out. But they've done a really good job at getting to where they are right now. And I'm really excited to see how they go next season. Didn't have great success in the Cups, out in the FA Cup in the third round by a replay to Everton, out in the EFL Cup in the third round. They beat Plymouth 4-2 and then lost to Manchester United 3-0. But they finished in the top half. And that was with Doucouré missing pretty much the whole season. He played 12 games. It was with Dean Henderson missing a chunk of the season through injury and then some chopping and changing in the goalkeeping position. Rob Holding missed, I think, the whole season. So they were lacking a bit of depth. Guehi missed 9 league games. Muniz obviously only came in January. Like, there's just a lot of change, a lot of turnover in the team week to week. And yet they were still able to finish in the top half. And there's a couple more players there, like David Ozo. I didn't even mention him. He's another one that's very highly regarded there. England under-18 international. Played 10 times in the league this past season, 12 times in all competitions. He's another one that they think can play a real important part in this squad. Like, they're very, very strong. They run very, very deep. Bit of depth is all they're lacking. And maybe they can just repurpose Jordan Ayew as a backup, as the right wing back. It's not ideal, and I'd rather not do it. But if you don't want to spend the money, he could do that for you. Jeffrey Schlupp absolutely can play left wing back. They bought him as a left winger / left fullback, so he can absolutely do that. You get more out of Franca next season. I'd expect more out of Ahamada. And I think Wharton, Elise, Guehi, they're only going to improve. They're only going to improve and keep getting better. And this Palace team are really well set up. Credit to them. Huge credit to them. Right, back after the break. Right, welcome back. So, Newcastle have finally landed a centre-back. Lloyd Kelly will join on a 5-year deal, having left Bournemouth. Play left back and play centre back. I prefer him at left back. I actually think he's best suited to left side in the 3. It was a pretty good signing for Toon in terms of depth. Omari Forson is leaving Manchester United and he will join Monza on a 4-year contract. The 19-year-old was out of contract at United and rejected offers to stay at the club. That's a bit of a blow to United because I do think he's quite a talented young player. Having been linked with Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United and a few other clubs, including Liverpool, but I don't think there's ever anything in that, Benjamin Sesko has decided to turn down all approaches and will sign a new contract with Red Bull Leipzig, or RB Leipzig. I think that's really good. I think it's the right decision. I think he had a really good end to the season, but it wasn't overall a great season for him, just in terms of how often he played and some of the performances. But another year there, I think, and by next summer he'll be ready for the big move. Bad news for the Dutch. Both Frankie de Jong and Hein Koopmeiners will both miss this summer's European Championships. Ian Maatsen has been called up, and I would expect we'll probably hear of one more been added to the squad, potentially Quinton Timber. It is a blow because I think de Jong and Koopmeiners were probably going to both start in midfield, and now both will be missing. On to the gossip, I suppose. Right, Chelsea have agreed personal terms with Michael Elise and are set to discuss scheduling payments to meet his release clause at Crystal Palace. Now, that is an exclusive for Give Me Sport. And it's according to Give Me Sport sources. So what we can say is that all of it is a lie. The Athletic have said today that Palace have basically told clubs, come and agree with us first, and then you can speak to our player. He has a buyout, but there's no scheduling of payments on a buyout. There's just a buyout. The thing is, it sounds like the buyout has two tiers, one for Champions League clubs and one for non-Champions League clubs, and Chelsea are a non-Champions League club. So, according to certain people who may or may not know, it would likely be closer to 90 million for a non-Champions League club. We'll wait and see. Fulham value João Palhinha at 60 million. That's a little bit high. You paid 20 for him. If you get 40, he's 28, he'll be 29 this summer. It's probably the right move. Manchester United and Tottenham are set to battle it out for Ebery Chieze. That's according to Football Insider. He doesn't really make sense for either team, if we're being honest. That's not a position of need for Manchester United. You've got Marcus Rashford, pretty good. You've got Garnacho, pretty good. And I mean, he could play 10, but you've got Bruno, and you could bring back Sancho. And he's not going to play right. Could make a little bit of sense for Tottenham, but I just don't feel like he's the type of left winger they need. They need someone a bit more direct, a bit more pacey, or they need a number 9 and move Son back out onto the left wing. Newcastle are no longer pursuing a deal for Georgi Mamardashvili after refusing to offer above £25.4 million, which is €30 million, despite the Spanish club valuing him at €35 million. I don't think it's fallen apart because of the €5 million differential in the valuation. West Ham are among the clubs interested in signing Nehuan Perez from Udinese. He's very good. He was at Atleti for a few years. He's very good. Brighton expect to announce Fabian Herzliya as the new manager this week. I think it's an ambitious but a clever appointment. Manchester United are unlikely to appoint Maurizio Pochettino if they part ways with Erik ten Hag. We're still waiting to hear what's happening with ten Hag. It's been weeks now. Pep Guardiola has rejected the idea he could one day return to Barcelona. He won't go to Barcelona because they're a mess and he's not walking into a ready-made team. He's not walking into Messi, Iniesta, Xavi, with a Busquets coming through the academy, with a Pedro coming through the academy, with a Piqué, with a Puyol. He's not walking into that. So he won't take the job. There's no money to spend there. He's definitely not going to take the job because this is what he does. Bayern Munich are interested in Levi Colwill. If he becomes available, there'll be Premier League offers for him. Atletico Madrid have rekindled their interest in Pierre-Emile Højbjerg after a 15 million switch fell through last summer. Leicester have identified Graham Potter as a potential successor for Enzo Maresca, but are also considering Steve Cooper. I think Potter's the one. Crystal Palace are set to sign Daichi Kamada on a free transfer. I mean, 27, versatile, really good. Play as the 9, play behind the 9. That's another, if they get that one across the line, it's another really good signing. Another really, really good signing. Palace are on the up. Like, they're never going to be a league title winner, but I think they can challenge for Europe next season. I really do. If they keep this team together. Now, if they lose pieces, like I said earlier, they'll have money to go and replace them, but it might not be as smooth as it is at the moment. But that's a great signing. John Textor has pulled out of the running to buy Everton following a breakdown in talks. Sporting Lisbon are interested in Wolves winger Chiquinho and will be prepared to pay about €10 million for the player. Chelsea have agreed personal terms with 17-year-old Brazilian defender Pedro Lima, who made his senior debut for Sport Recife in January. Another young right back. That's definitely what you need. Brendan Aronson, who spent last season on loan at Union Berlin, plans to stay at Leeds despite having interest in Germany. Good. I like that for him. I like that for them as well. Juventus are set to talk to Aston Villa in the coming days with a deal for Douglas Luiz, but the transfer could only happen if a player also moves from the Italian club to Villa, so they'd be looking to do some sort of swap. Weston McKennie's name has been mentioned. There's been a few others thrown around. If Villa... let me see now. I know Chelsea have actually mooted a Conor Gallagher for John Duran swap, but I wonder who you've got. Like, Weston McKennie's not really. You don't want to sign Weston McKennie and Conor Gallagher. I'm just looking at the players that they own, that they could potentially look to move on, or that Villa could potentially have interest in. There's a couple here. Like, you have to think of what Villa need. So centre-back, Villa could use one there. So Dean Huijsen, the young, well, he's declared for Spain now, but he was born in the Netherlands and played for the Netherlands. But he would be ideal to bring in for that centre-back group. I think that would be one that would make a ton of sense for Villa. Bring him in, pair him with Pau Torres. He can play either side, but you develop him on the right. You got Konza, him, Torres. That all of a sudden looks really good. Who else do they have there? Let's see. Facundo Gonzalez, another talented one. Spent last season on loan at Sampdoria. He one they could look to bring in? Maybe. If they want to move on from Mings, maybe he would make sense as the backup. The obvious one is Matthias Sula. Now, that's a big, big time talent. So maybe they could ask for him. Tony De Winter's good, but I think he's going to Genoa permanently. I think that one's already done. Who else is in their squad that makes sense? Fagioli, super talented, but I don't know that they'd let him go. He's just back off a ban for gambling. I'm not sure they'd let him go. But him next to Boubacar Kamara would make sense. Moretti, yeah, maybe. A bit more attack-minded. He's very, very talented. He could work. You're not going to want any of these. They won't let Keenan Yildiz go. Samuel Illing Jr. is one that's been mentioned. I like him. I think he's a decent player. I just don't know that he fits at Villa. I think Matthias Sula, if they could get him and Huijsen and like small sum of money, because you know they're going to try and cook the books a little bit both sides on what these players are actually worth. But if Villa could get those two, that's two huge, huge talents. If Huijsen's 19 and Sula's 21, and they both fit into how Villa play. You could play Sula as the right side midfielder, Jacob Ramsey left side, Diaby or Bailey off Watkins, Kamara and McGinn. If Gallagher arrives, maybe not, he can play either in central midfield. McGinn can play right side, he can play as 10, Diaby can play. Like, you'd have a bunch of players you could move around there. And then Huijin coming in really does help centre-back. That's what they should push for. If Douglas Luiz wants to go to Juve, and let's say Juve will pay 70 million, even if you have to pay 35 for Sula and 25 for Huijin, you can bank the 75, even though you're only actually getting 15. You can bank the 75 now. That clears your FFP problem, or your profit sustainability problem, because the two players you're bringing in with amortization, you can extrapolate that out over 5 years. So that's 12 million a year. So you end up 63 million in the green, in the black. So I think they need to make like 60 million. I think that's where they stand. So if they did that, that would set them on a really good footing. And then maybe there's a couple more sales there that Villa can make this summer that would fund the other things they need, such as a left back, maybe a better backup goalkeeper. But those two would fill massive and are huge, huge talents. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with that one. What else do we have here? Ipswich are set to rival Besiktas for Rangers and Wales midfielder Tom Lawrence. And Manchester United have been handed a boost in the pursuit of João Neves, who has rejected a contract offer from Benfica. I don't think it really hands United any kind of boost. He's got a 120 million euro buyout and is contracted as we speak until 2028. So it doesn't really hand them a boost at all, if we're being honest. Right, folks, that'll do me for today. I will see you all Thursday. No podcast tomorrow, but I will see you all Thursday. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
The delicious ice-cold taste of Dr. Pepper has a lasting effect on people. Lindsay from Sacramento said,
Pro tip, 40 degrees is the perfect temperature for an ice-cold Dr. Pepper.
why is 40 degrees the perfect temperature for Dr. Pepper? We brought in Sue from Duluth, Minnesota to tell us.
Oh, yeah, I know a thing or two about cold. Oh, that right there is the perfect kind of ice cold for Dr. Pepper. I'd share that with my friend Nancy. She likes Dr. Pepper, too, you know. My coldest...
All right, that'll be all, Sue. Having a perfect temperature for your Dr. Pepper? It's a Pepper thing. Inspired by real fan posts.